Hey, good evening. I'm going to try and make a connection, um, a simplified connection between two al-Qaeda operatives who were involved with the hijacking of American Airlines Flight 77 to the intelligence agencies, and that without a plane actually hitting the Pentagon, this connection is severed. And this is maybe the reason why there are so many conspiracies, fringe conspiracies even, that surround uh, the Pentagon and Shanksville. It's such a divisive issue within the 9/11 truth movement. And for the reasons of lack of plane debris, an abundance of films and documentaries and lectures that have propagated the no plane, no hijacker theories. And so what I want to do is I want to show to certain people of the 9/11 War Room, which is a room meant for activism by some very prominent people. And I hope this video actually is of some value in regards to why I think the severing of the hijackers from the planes in itself is a complete disaster in regards to holding somebody accountable for 9/11. Now, with that being said, let's leave aside the destruction of the World Trade Center and who's responsible for it or who's not. I'm clearly not the type of person to talk about this issue. I am not qualified to speak on this issue because I really don't know anything about physics. And even though I still believe that in the basement levels, we have an issue of bombs in trucks, as reported by Rick Sanchez of MSNBC News. And I forgot the one reporter from USA Today. I would like to concentrate just on the two al-Qaeda operatives involving the CIA and the intelligence services who were monitoring them years prior, and their connection to not just the CIA withholding information from the FBI and the State Department, but to the hijacking themselves, and why this is so important, because without this connection, we can't hold certain names responsible. Even if you believe that the planes were hijacked, but that they switched in midair, regardless, we still don't have a connection. Plus, on top of that, you're going to have to prove somehow how the planes were swapped and how all the information from the FAA, FBI, and TSB is manipulated. And since really this hasn't been done up until the present time, it would involve a lot more people as well in the operation, but you don't have to. It involves a lot less people when you just have the planes hijacked, crashed into wherever they need to crash to, and just claim malfeasance, or just lie and basically say, we shared information with certain agencies, but they never took any precautions. Because that's exactly what happened in the 9/11 Commission, as well as the Joint House. Okay, so the two operatives are Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi are al-Qaeda operatives. They're the only ones with any real experience with the group al-Qaeda. And going back to 1993, the CIA had kept records on these two longer than any of the 9/11 operatives, save bin Laden. We'll hold that for now. Now, according to CIA Director George Tenet, the DCI, the Director of Central Intelligence, that their records about Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi start back in 1995, when they were fighting with the Muslim Mujahideen in Serbia against the Yugoslavs and the Soviets. Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi both travel to Chechnya, and they have a long-standing connection with al-Qaeda that begins in Afghanistan, because they traveled to Afghanistan in 1996. Now, Khalid al-Mihdhar was the first one to train at Al-Farouk training camp in 1996, and then he fights in Chechnya in 1997. Now, Nawaf al-Hazmi follows suit, and he travels to Afghanistan in 1997. And both of them had sworn loyalty, or as in Arabic, it's called bayat, to bin Laden in 1998. Nawaf al-Hazmi actually fights against the Northern Alliance led by Ahmed Shah Massoud for north of the country in 1998, along with his brother. He has also a brother named Salim al-Hazmi. They both, all three of these men also fought in Chechnya in 1998 by the CIA. So now we have CIA records of these three men who were involved with the hijacking of planes on 9/11. Okay, Nawaf al-Hazmi, Khalid al-Mihdhar, and Salim al-Hazmi, the brother of Nawaf al-Hazmi. Okay, now in 1996, the National Security Agency, the NSA, who had been wiretapping and listening to the phone calls of Osama bin Laden back in 1992, were record keeping about all the phone calls that were calling, bin Laden was calling wherever in the world. And so all these phone numbers were kept log dated, recorded. One number in particular caught their attention, and it was coming from a safe house in the capital of Sana'a, the country is Yemen. And so in 1996, the NSA informed the CIA about an al-Qaeda communications hub located in Sana'a, Yemen. The NSA, which does signal intelligence, that is listening to phone calls, collecting emails and text messages, where the CIA does human intelligence. Now, they also do signals intelligence, but they're not as expansive or exquisite in their technology or the analytical experience as, say, the NSA. So the NSA started listening to the phone calls of the Yemen hub. The CIA placed a bug inside the house, but only can listen to half of the phone calls, that which is made outgoing, not incoming, because they don't have a bug on the phone. But they do plant agents nearby and can see who's coming in and out of the house. So that house is closely monitored. Now, this is important because Khalid al-Mihdhar also resides here because he's married to the daughter of the owner of the house. Her name is Hoda al-Hada. The owner of the house is Ahmed al-Hada. Now, I know that there are some people in the war room who are saying, oh, God, these Arab names, just relax. It's easy to remember. And remember, these names are really important because this is where we're going to make a connection to the CIA. Okay, I'm going to explain in short order. Now, because they noticed that Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi were coming in and out of the house, and because they could listen to phone calls coming from all over the world, bin Laden, Ayman al-Zawahiri, and all these other al-Qaeda operatives all over the world kept calling this number because this was a conduit for al-Qaeda communications. So what happens? The NSA in the year 2000, I'm sorry, in 1999, overheard a phone call regarding a huge meeting in Malaysia. And this meeting would involve the biggest names in terrorism from Southeast Asia and the Middle East. So the person on the other end of the line, his name is Tawfiq bin Atash. His nickname is Khalid. He uses the name Khalid on the phone. And so the NSA wrote down the name, Khalid. They also only know Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi by their first names. But later on, during this phone call, they learn about their last names, but they never pass it to the CIA. Now, the NSA wants to have photographs of these people. So, because they don't do human intelligence, they told the CIA and the FBI that there's a big terrorist summit that's going to happen in January of 2000. Okay? So, the CIA, they go there. They know where it's going to be held. It's going to be held in a condominium in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And in this condominium that is rented by Yazid Sufat. He's a businessman in Indonesia and also has links with a terrorist group called Jemaah Islamiyah there. Now, the CIA tells the Malaysian authorities to monitor this place and picture and take photographs of every single body coming and going from this residence. They do. Now, when they're traveling to Malaysia, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi would later claim that they think they're being followed. They weren't sure. but they think they were. Now, when they get to Malaysia, they go to this meeting. The biggest names of terrorism: Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Ramzi bin al-Shib, Tawfiq bin Atash, Zacharias Musawi, Ridwan Isamuddin, Jean, Sandra. It's driving you nuts, right? At this point, all these names. And there's so much more. But these names are important because they're the ones who are participating in big terrorist attacks, like the bombing of the USS Cole, the Millennium Plot, which failed, and of course, September 11, 2001. And that's what they were talking about in this meeting. Now, we don't have a recording of the meeting, but the Malaysian authorities took pictures and they sent it to the CIA. Now, they sent it to a place called the Bin Laden Issue Station. It's a big virtual station that is nondescript in some motel, in some mall in Maryland, in Virginia. And a very select group of CIA case officers work here, like Michael Scheuer and Alfreda Ambikowski, Michelle A. Casey. Over like 60 people work here. And they're collecting information regarding Al-Qaeda all throughout the world. And there's a lot of agencies that work here, like the NSA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the FBI. But the CIA hates the FBI because they don't like where they were coming from. They were coming from New York City. And in charge of the counterterrorism in New York City is John O'Neill. So Michael Scheuer and John O'Neill, they have a beef because they're both egotistical, they're very proud, and they're both the best when it comes to Arab fundamentalism in the world regarding the FBI and the CIA. Okay. Now, when they go to this meeting, they leave. And when they leave, they go to a hotel in United Arab Emirates. I'm sorry, this is before they come to the meeting. Sorry, it's before. I'm sorry, I have to backtrack a little bit. Before they came to the meeting, they went to United Arab Emirates. And they stood in a hotel. The CIA took photographs of their passports, and they saw that they had U.S. visas on their passports. So what happens from here, right? Well, they leave the meeting and they go to Thailand. The NSA, who's listening to the phone calls in the Malaysian sub, also is listening to the cell phone call of Nawaf al-Hazmi. He has a cell phone. CIA, basically now under a new station chief, Richard Blee, in 1999, in the year 2000, Richard Blee goes and meets with the leading principals in the State Department, which is called a national security briefing, of all the top people: the Secretary of State, the FBI director, the NSA director, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and they talk about the burgeoning problems of threatening national security at the current time. So Richard Blee and the CIA go, we lost these two guys when they left the meeting in Malaysia. Now, what they didn't tell them was that they took photographs of both men's passports, which had valid U.S. visas, tourist visas, which would enable the FBI to start monitoring them. They never told the FBI or the State Department this. Now, a cable comes in to the CIA's Alex station, the Bin Laden Issue Station. It's codenamed Alex Station. The cable itself says that there's a pictures of the photographs of the passports and the U.S. visas. And one of the men that read it was Doug Miller of the FBI in New York. And he tries to draft a cable warning FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. about these two al-Qaeda operatives who were involved with the U.S. East Africa embassy bombings, and that they are longstanding al-Qaeda threats. All right. So they try and warn the FBI this. And while they're doing this, they have to get permission from the manager of Alex Station, the second in charge, which is the deputy chief of Alex Station, the second man in charge. His name is Tom Wilshire. So the cable goes to Tom Wilshire. Wilshire looks at it, goes, we're going to have to hold this off. So he tells Michelle and Casey, who's the lead head manager of the Yemen hub operation, to hold off sending this from, please hold off per Wilshire. So that means hold off from sending, coming from the orders of Tom Wilshire. Why would they do this? Isn't everybody on the same page? Isn't the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, the DIA? Aren't they all on the same page? Obviously not. Now, that was an idea that was purported in a Richard Gage interview with Art Olivier, who once claimed that all the agencies are working together. They're not. And in this case, I'm going to show that all three, the NSA, CIA, and the FBI, are not on the same page because they all withheld information from each other. Question is why? So Doug Miller and Mark Rossini, who's also from New York, they complain. Why is the cable being sent? There are two terrorists, long-standing al-Qaeda operatives, dangerous men who were involved with the 1998 East Africa bombings at some level. How do we not inform the FBI? This is their jurisdiction, the Department of Justice. They're coming to the United States. The CIA knows this. They know that much, but the NSA knows more because they're listening to the cell phone of Nawaf al-Hazmi. So both Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi land on January 15th of 2000. And again, Khalid al-Mihdhar later claims that he's being followed. He says this on the phone. I'll talk about this in a minute. Now, the CIA knows they're in the country. The NSA knows they're in the country, but the FBI doesn't know, and neither does the State Department, because nobody's telling them nothing. This is huge. We have a name now, Tom Wilshire, Michelle and Casey. This is coming from the words of the FBI, who basically say that the information about two al-Qaeda operatives coming inside the United States are here inside the United States. Gene, Sandra, you get what I'm coming at? This is huge. Now, they're inside the United States, and while they're here, they're being assisted by Saudi operatives like Omar al-Bayoumi, who incidentally meets them in some little restaurant, which is now defunct. It was a halal restaurant. I think it's on Valencia Street. I could be wrong. Some street in Los Angeles. And it's a long street, lots of restaurants there. And according to Omar al-Bayoumi, he's sitting inside the restaurant and they too walk in. Well, we find out that that's not the case. Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Mihdhar were there first. And Omar al-Bayoumi, as well as an associate, Ben Kaysen, I think his name is. According to Ben Kaysen, Omar al-Bayoumi himself, they come in second. And Omar al-Bayoumi hears them speaking Arabic, and he goes and greets to himself. And while he's there, he gives them, later on, he tells them to come to San Diego. He helps them get a driver's license. He helps them get an apartment by paying the month's rent and becoming the guarantor on the lease. He lets them use his cell phone. He throws a party for them. And then all of a sudden payments start coming in from Saudi Arabia, from some company that we don't know yet at that time. And they were coming in from a bank account that was later tracked to an account from Riggs Bank. And the accountant's name was Haifa bin Faisal. Oh, who's this woman giving money to intermediaries who are giving it to Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi? Who's Haifa bin Faisal? Well, she's the wife of former U.S. Saudi ambassador Bandar bin Sultan, otherwise known as Bandar Bush, because of his close links to the Bush family that goes back decades. So we have an account from Riggs Bank that went to intermediaries like Osama Basnan and Omar al-Bayoumi, who were giving it to Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. These payments were coming monthly, anywhere between $2,500 to $4,000. And it went on for like 14 months. Now, they're inside the United States, and they were selected, allegedly selected, to be pilots by bin Laden. Now, the reason why I say allegedly, because that testimony comes from Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Ramzi bin al-Shibh. And because they were tortured, we don't know whether that's true or not, which is, I think, the reason why they tortured them, because now we're in a state of paralysis. We don't know what to believe, even if they were telling the truth. Okay? And so this went on for a while. The payments started coming in. Then they moved from San Diego. They moved to a place in Orange County. They go and see this guy who's basically renting out rooms in some mosque. He's a resident of the mosque. And he meets the guy who's renting rooms, and they said they'd like to rent a room. Well, this guy, his name is Abdus Sheikh. He was an FBI informant for San Diego that went back many years when there was a series of bombings in the late 1980s in Orange County. And the FBI recruited him because he had many contacts in the Islamic community. And so they recruited him as an informant who gave basic information about temporary visas being overstayed by certain people, not much in the way of terrorism that we know of. And his code name was Stan. So he rented the room to these two guys. And so Abdus Sheikh told his handler, Stephen Butler, about these two Saudis, young men that were inside the United States. And Butler basically said, all right, well, who are they? He only told them their first names. Now, Butler basically said, well, I'd like to run them through the tip-off database just to see their backgrounds. And so Abdus Sheikh never told them their formal names. And usually he would hem and haw and basically say, no, these are good guys. You don't need to know who they are. They're not a danger. So he stays with them for a while. Then they leave. And the FBI loses track of them. Well, San Diego basically does, because they basically don't know where they went, because Abdus Sheikh never told them and never told them their full names. So here they are, two guys inside the United States who work at a car wash in Los Angeles. This car wash owned by an Arab named Sam Mustafa, who hated the United States and would basically say that the United States deserves to be destroyed. And basically the FBI knew who he was for years. And there were people who were working at this car station who knew Nawaf al-Hazmi, because Khalid al-Mihdhar basically left the United States to go to Yemen to see his wife, who was pregnant. Bin Laden basically allowed him to go and visit his wife. But Nawaf al-Hazmi stood behind and worked at this car wash, which was under watch by the FBI. And allegedly, when the FBI interviewed these men after 9/11, they basically said that Nawaf al-Hazmi told them about a planes operation that was going to happen soon. Wow. Meanwhile, while all this is happening, the NSA and the CIA knew that these two guys were in the States all these years and never told the State Department or the FBI for 16 months. All these Saudi operatives inside the United States, unaware. The FBI were unaware. The State Department were unaware, that we know of, about them managing Khalid al-Mihdhar. Now we have names, because we have Omar al-Bayoumi, Osama Basnan, Fahad al-Tamari, who basically was an imam in Los Angeles, who was the first Saudi operative to meet them. I'm sorry I didn't mention this, and gave them lodging while they were here. for the first 2 weeks. The 9/11 Commission will basically interview all these guys. You know what they said? We never met them before. So at least we now know that we have Saudi operatives inside the United States, as well as the NSA and the CIA, knowing that they were inside the United States, knowing that they were al-Qaeda operatives, knowing that they were involved with a terrorist attack on a U.S. Target in Africa, the embassy bombings, but never warned anybody. Meanwhile, the NSA was still listening to phone calls in the Yemen hub. God knows what they were talking about. Now, I'll lend to your curiosity, your inquisitive minds, right? What do you think al-Qaeda operatives are talking about? These are serious men. They're not talking about the Yankees. They're not talking about how to make cookies, okay? They don't know anything about Western way of life. They're talking about what? Are they talking about operations? Well, if so, the NSA listened to every single word that was said on those phones. You ever notice nobody, hardly anyone outside of Paul Thompson or Kevin Fenton or John Gold has ever brought up about the phone calls? Ray Nowalski's another, John Duffy, the only ones who bring up about the nature of phone calls by the NSA. You ever notice, if you ever watched the 9/11 Commission, why they never really interview Michael Hayden, the director of the NSA? But they do interview the director of the DCI, George Tenet, and Robert Mueller, the FBI. I'm going to tell you why this is huge, hugely important. On August of 2001, the CIA, under Richard Blee and George Tenet, they do an emergency meeting that Tenet never did before. They go to the White House. They tell Condoleezza Rice, we're coming. We have an emergency meeting for you. So Richard Clark, the counterterrorism czar, Robert Mueller, director of the FBI, Condoleezza Rice, Secretary of State, Richard Myers, Joint Chiefs of Staff, they're all there, as well as John O'Neill from New York and Michael Hayden, the NSA. George Tenet, Richard Blee, they go to the meeting. Richard Blee tells them, I'm sorry, not Richard Blee, Cofer Black. It's Cofer Black and George Tenet, not Richard Blee. Cofer Black says, we are going to be attacked. There are 2 al-Qaeda operatives inside the United States. Blew everyone's mind. Richard Clark says, how long you know they were inside the United States? They don't say. Now, here's the catch. They only know them by their first names. Meanwhile, at this point, the CIA knows their full names. So George Tenet, Cofer Black are telling all the principals at this meeting there are 2 al-Qaeda operatives. The meeting was August 16, 2001. 2 weeks, a month prior, someone from counterterrorism at the CIA went to the FBI in headquarters in Washington, D.C., and held a meeting. Now, this analyst who's redacted in 9/11 Commission report, I found out later, his name is Clark Shannon. And he has photographs that were taken by the Malaysian authorities at the Malaysia Summit meeting. And he tells the FBI there, the FBI agents are Steve Bongard and Dina Corsi, and tells them, you know anybody in these pictures? Steve Bongard, Dina Corsi say, no. Who are they? Why are you following them? Clark Shannon says, I'm not at liberty to tell you why, on orders from Director Tenet. So now the FBI is saying, well, then why did you show us these pictures? Why are you following these guys? Who are they? The pictures are of Khalid al-Mihdhar, Nawaf al-Hazmi, and Walid bin Attash, Khalid, the guys that were heard on the phone by the NSA about the Malaysia Summit meeting. By the way, these pictures were never shared with the NSA, even though the NSA told the FBI, share the pictures because we're putting you in the operation. So what do you think Clark Shannon was doing here, Gene, Sandra? What do you think? He was fishing to see what they knew. They had no idea they were in the country. And he never told them they were in the country until later, another meeting, and tells them that Their names are Khalid and Nawaf. Never tells them their full name, and doesn't tell them that they had US visas or that they were inside the country. They intentionally withheld this information. Now we have a link of intentionally withholding information from the FBI, and we have names to go with it. George Tenet, on orders from Clark Shannon. I did a podcast on this, where basically George Tenet later tells the 9/11 Commission, the Joint House Inquiry, that Clark Shannon never said that, even though Clark Shannon told him, yeah, I did. So Clark Shannon told George Tenet the truth, and George Tenet didn't tell the truth at the Joint House Inquiry. And the person interviewing George Tenet, Carl Levin, basically says, well, he told you and he told us something different. And George Tenet was like, well, and Carl Levin said, okay. This is huge. This is, it's so enormous. Now we just have to find out why they intentionally withheld information. And why did this NSA withhold information from the CIA, FBI, or the State Department? September 11, 2001. Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi are seen on a Vorant camera system going through security screening. They board American Airlines 77. Their ticket counter agent gave them their boarding passes. She was interviewed by the 9/11 Commission. Security screeners were interviewed by the FBI. And in that camera system, the camera recording, you see Flight 77 passenger Marie Ray Sopper wearing a white shirt and gray blouse, holding her cat in a red cargo animal holder. And right behind her are hijackers Khalid al-Mihdhar and Majid Makid. And behind them, Salim al-Hazmi, Nawaf al-Hazmi. Now, later on, we find out through many years of painstaking patience with the latest revelations by the FBI that these declassified files show that Omar al-Bayoumi, who once said to the 9/11 Commission that he never knew these people, now we have his name declassified, unredacted, in the 510-page release document that was just released 2 weeks ago, which the media has been silent over. The FBI, barely a mention. Why? On orders from the White House, of course. Don't make a big thing of this. Barely anyone mentioned it. And I hate to give myself a pat on the back, but I'm like one of the very few people that ever mentioned it in the video. I read the files, 510 pages. Omar al-Bayoumi's name is linked to Saudi Airport National, this company, Saudi Arabian Airline National Company, that's owned by a Saudi prince, and his name is unredacted, Saeed al-Rashidi, who is given payments to Omar al-Bayoumi, and al-Bayoumi was giving money to Khalid al-Mihdhar to Wapaz. So now we have a link to the Saudi government, to an intermediary who once claimed he never knew Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, and he's giving them money. Wait, I couldn't believe what I was reading. It affirmed everything I thought would happen anyway, but we just didn't have the concrete information. Now we do. We have a link of intentionally withholding information by two agencies, the NSA, the CIA. Now we have a link of Saudi government financing to two hijackers on 9/11. Huge. We can name names. Here it is. Guess what? For those who don't believe that Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi hijacked the plane to begin with, all those contacts, the operations themselves, don't exist. And there is no link. Now, if you're someone who espouses that, yes, they hijacked the plane, but then somehow that plane basically was swapped in midair without radar even realizing it, and that all of the physical evidence of their human remains were planted at the scene of the crime into Pentagon, or that they were manufactured in some lab and made to claim that, oh, this belonged to the hijackers. Well, guess what? You're going to have to make that connection provable, because if you don't, then the links that I just talked about to you in this video don't exist. And this goes back to the 90s. It all doesn't exist, all of it. And not even that, not only does that exist, that doesn't exist, but the hijackers don't exist. Now we have no names, nothing. We have conspiracies that aren't even beyond provable. And you're right back to square one. So I hope that explains it, Sandra Jean, and to anybody else in the war room, if they're ever watching this video, which I'm going to post on YouTube anyway. But I really just wanted to briefly discuss the best I can, the simplest I can, about the error of not having hijackers on these planes, or that there was a swap in midair, which is not provable by any sense of the imagination. And the disconnect between holding certain people accountable from the CIA, from the NSA, and Saudis who were financing operatives inside the United States that went to two hijackers. I'm hoping that this video reaches you. And if you have any questions, of course, please feel free to put them at the bottom of the description page. Put them in the comment section, or reach me by email, Jean, Sandra, if you have any additional questions. I'll be more than happy to assist anybody who has any questions about this further. Good night.